were. But something we didn't get back around to was to talk about Andrew Warren, who was removed by Governor DeSantis under Governor DeSantis' authority as the chief executive of the state of Florida to remove any officer who is demonstrating a neglect of his duty or incompetence. And what Governor DeSantis pointed out, and so many people already knew, was that Andrew Warren has come out publicly and said he was not going to enforce specific laws. He's also stopped enforcing whole categories of laws. And that's why you saw a whole bevy of law enforcement officers standing behind the governor at the press conference removing Andrew Warren. The governor called him out as being somebody who was funded by George Soros. I'd say in the greater Bay Area media circles, we were the first ones to put that out there. We've been talking about that Andrew Warren's campaign was funded by George Soros almost from the very beginning. We've been telling you that. So if you've been listening here, you knew about this a lot sooner than most people. But the governor's now removed him. And guess what? We've got a very special guest who's going to be calling into the show. He's been on the show before. You're going to love it. He was there at the press conference, standing right next to the governor. So he's going to give us his special perspective on the Andrew Warren story, along with another very important local story. We'll be right back on the Morgan Streetman Show.
And we are back on the Morgan Streetman Show. As we were going to break, Morgan, you were chatting a little bit. You were leading us into the story about Andrew Warren and what's happened with Governor DeSantis. And we have someone who was there, who was at the press conference on the line right now, who's a friend of the show as well.
Well, let's bring on Mike Beltran, local representative here in eastern Hillsborough County, southeastern Hillsborough County, and a longtime friend of the show, regular guest. Mike, welcome to the Morgan Streetman Show.
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, good morning to you. And, I was so glad to be watching that press conference with Governor DeSantis a couple of weeks ago, and I see you standing right there next to him. And I said, that's my man, Mike Beltran. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on the removal of Andrew Warren, and if you've got anything interesting you can add to the story that folks might not already know.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we'll start with the Constitution, because that's the source of the governor's power. Frankly, was the source of Mr. Warren's power. And the Constitution's very clear. Article 4 of the Constitution sets forth executive powers. And Section 1A, the second sentence of the very first paragraph of Article 4 says the governor shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Moving down to Section 7A of that same article, it says the governor may suspend from office any state officer not subject to impeachment, any county officer for malfeasance, misfeasance, neglect of duty, drunkenness, incompetence, permanent inability to perform official duties, or commission of a felony, and may fill the office by appointment for the period of suspension. And that's exactly what the governor did. And frankly, Mr. Warren checks a few of those boxes. I'm not going to say which ones, but he checks a few of them. And not only was the governor allowed to do this, he was required. He was required to do this because the law was not being faithfully executed in Hillsborough County. Everybody from street protesters who destroyed property or threatened people's physical security, all the way to the fishhawk kidnapper, those people were not prosecuted, or they were not prosecuted appropriately, or they were not detained pending trial as appropriate, as the Constitution and laws require or allow. And he just wasn't doing his job. He wasn't engaging with the other branches of government in the way that he should be. He wasn't trying cases. He wasn't charging cases. He wasn't addressing concerns from the legislature. We had several incidents in Fishhawk that were either slow-walked or not prosecuted at all, or the cases were dismissed, or homicides were resulting in non-incarcerative sentences, that is no jail time, with dismissal for good behavior after a short interval. There were a whole bunch of problems. And these are kind of the meat and potatoes, everyday things. I know that the governor and the attorney general and some other folks were also concerned about, some of the more headline-friendly stories about not enforcing abortion laws, which is also a very serious thing. There's an abortion clinic right there on 60, right there on Kennedy Boulevard, not more than a mile from the Mr. Warren's office, and they need to comply with the 15-week ban and anything else we may enact, and also other legislative enactments, both actual and potential, that he said he's not going to enforce. And he's not the governor. He's not the legislature. He's the state attorney. If he wants to be the governor or the legislature, he can run for a seat. He knows how to do that. He knows how to run in an election. And he's kind of put together a very false narrative, which I could go into. But that's kind of the gist in a nutshell of what happened and why it happened.
Yeah, basically, he did not want to enforce certain laws. He said publicly that he was not enforcing certain laws. We all know, those of us that live here in Hillsborough County, we all know he actually was not enforcing certain laws. And so, I mean, they're trying to spin this a totally different way, like, oh, well, he was just talking about it. No, this was really happening, and it's been happening for years. And those of us in the legal community in Tampa all know about it. We all know he isn't enforcing the laws. And those criminals that were pulled before him by his office that he let off with not even a slap on the wrist, they know he's not enforcing the laws. And the victims who can't get justice, they know he's not enforcing the laws. So everybody knew Andrew Warren wasn't enforcing the laws. That's why he was put there. He's one of these Soros-funded prosecutors, just like we've got all over the country, who aren't enforcing the laws, and they're doing it for political reasons. But you're exactly right, Mike. If you want to do that, go try to get yourself elected to the legislature and change the laws, or go try to become governor, and then you become the chief executive charged with enforcing the laws or not. But you can't do it as an official, as a county official, as a state official at a lower level. Your job simply is to follow the law, and he wasn't doing that. Now, there's been all kinds of talk about what they're going to do about it, which I find, frankly, a little bit humorous. They think they're going to somehow take back the seat. And I think they will be applying, they say, for some kind of an extraordinary writ, probably a writ of quo warranto, which is going to try to command the governor to say by what authority. But Representative Beltran, you just laid it out exactly. It's constitutional authority that the governor has to do exactly what he did for the reasons, the litany of reasons that you laid out here. So I don't think that writ will ultimately be successful, but, obviously we'll have to wait and see what happens if they do try to pursue that. But there's no question in the minds of the people who live here in Hillsborough County that we all know Andrew Warren was not enforcing the laws, and he was doing it for political reasons, for social justice, they call it, social justice warriors. That's why he was doing it, and he was funded and paid for by George Soros. And I'm glad the governor stepped up and did what he did. I'm proud of our governor. I think he's the greatest governor in the country. And I'm proud he stepped up and took a stand like so many governors haven't done all across the country. But here in Florida, Ron DeSantis is not scared to stand up and take a stand. Well, Representative Beltran, we want to hear from you on some other issues. And I know you've got a little bit to tell us about the Jerry Torres race, where he's challenging Kathy Castor, who almost seems to be totally ensconced in Hillsborough County and can't be unseated. But I know that even though that seems to be the case, that, Republicans all over the state of Florida are making real progress in elections. And so the Democrats are pulling out all the stops to try to keep them out of office. And you've got some information to share with us on that race that's pretty interesting.
Yes, absolutely. So I came on the file in mid-July, and what I discovered is not only are they trying to sue somebody off the ballot, and Jerry Torres, he's former special forces, he's a successful businessman, and he's running. He wants to go and try to give back and serve his country again, and he came in to the race with some money. And he announced that publicly. And I think in this red wave election, Representative Castor is terrified that, somebody actually may run a competitive race against her. And so what she did is she recruited a friend, Sean Shaw. We know who Sean Shaw is.
Yes.
Sean Shaw was the Democrat nominee for Attorney General in 2018. And he won the Democrat primary by suing Ryan Torrens, who's another Democratic lawyer here in town. He sued him off the ballot, and that was reversed by the appeals court after the primary. So he won the primary, but it wasn't proper. It was moot, and the appeals court wrote an opinion because they were so mad about what Mr. Shaw did to get an unfair advantage in that race. So there's Mr. Shaw. He's friends with Castor. He admitted that at deposition. And then there's a gentleman who works at the law firm where Castor's husband is a partner, and apparently it looks from his advertising like he's fairly successful, possibly a rainmaker, but definitely a partner. And this gentleman's an associate, and he says he's a Republican, and he says he's concerned about some paperwork issues that Mr. Torres allegedly has. But the fact of the matter is they were both recruited by, in the case of Shaw, by Castor's campaign manager and former chief of staff, and in the case of this other gentleman, by Castor's husband, Bill Lewis, who was a partner at the Butler firm. And they recruited these folks, and then the Florida Democrat Party joined in, and they filed a lawsuit. And they don't want to win at the ballot box. The Constitution says you decide elections at the ballot box. They went up to Tallahassee. They didn't file it in Tampa. They went up to Tallahassee, over 200 miles away, and they forum shopped, and they asked a judge in Tallahassee to make decisions that folks in South Tampa and in St. Petersburg and Clearwater should be making. They took away our jury trial right. We didn't get a jury trial.
Mm-hmm.
There's no jury in the United States or anywhere else in the common law realm would throw somebody off the ballot when the election's less than a month away. Now it's almost a week away. The issue should be decided. If there's a paperwork problem, put that on a mailer, put that on TV, put that on radio. Don't go sue somebody. You're supposed to win at the ballot box, not at the courthouse. And they can't win at the courthouse, and they know that.
Right.
And what's even worse is one of his primary opponents, one of the Republican primary opponents. I'm not going to say which one. I don't know either of them from Adam, and I'm not going to say which one's going around saying this. He went, according to a bunch of people in Republican circles, he went to a Republican club meeting earlier this month or late last month, and he said that he prefers Castor over Torres. And this guy's a Republican, and he's running.
Wow.
And he had his own paperwork problems, and he was allowed to stay on the ballot. Why? Because he's not a threat to Castor.
Well, I tell you, with Republicans like these, as we like to say on the show, with Republicans like these, who needs Democrats, right, Mike? Hey, can you stick around, and we'll talk to you on the other side of this break for just a second longer?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We are back on the Morgan Streetman Show with a special guest on the line. We're joined by Mike Beltran. He was bringing us up to speed on the situation with Andrew Warren, and then also with Torres. Who is this? Is this your client, Mike? Wanted to double check on that.
This is my
as well.
client, and what the way the case stands right now, and I'm litigation counsel. That's my role. And the way the case stands right now is that we got the First District Court of Appeal, which is the appeals court up in Tallahassee. They've stayed the trial court's ruling. So Mr. Torres is on the ballot, and as it stands now, the votes for Mr. Torres will be counted, notwithstanding the Democrats' attempts to disenfranchise the folks who voted for or want to vote for Mr. Torres. So the votes will count as it stands now. The primary is in 8 days, and we'll have the results from the primary. And the thing that I would emphasize, and Mr. Torres is a client, but I think he's also a good candidate, is that he's the only person who has the resources to beat Castor. This is going to be a red wave, but this is also going to be a heavily resourced race. Castor has a 7-figure war chest. So does Mr. Torres. With all due respect to his Republican opponents, they don't have any 7-figure war chest, and whatever amount they've raised, they've mostly spent. And so really, if good constitutional conservative voters in South Tampa, Clearwater, St. Pete, if they want to have a red seat, then Torres is the guy to beat Castor. And that's frankly why Torres is moved into this district. He was going to run for an easier district. He actually went out of his way to contest a deep blue seat because he thought he could win, and he thought he could do everyone a service by getting rid of one of Pelosi's lieutenants, Congresswoman Castor, and replacing her with a genuine conservative. And that's what we're trying to accomplish here. That's why I took on this representation, because I believe in Mr. Torres. I believe the Republicans are going to retake the House, and I pledge to do whatever needed to be done in any of these seats, whether 15, 14, or 16, to make sure that we have good conservatives. And frankly, I thought about running for each of those seats myself. But at the end of the day, when the dust settled, I saw quality candidates in each one of those seats. I said, let me sit back, continue to do my job at the state level, take care of my family, do my law practice, and contribute that way. And that's exactly what I'm doing. But I've been very clear that we absolutely must retake all of the Tampa Bay seats. And we need to get Pelosi out. And we need to get Pelosi out by a large margin, that she never comes back, and that we can enact a proper conservative agenda. Because the last time we had Paul Ryan and Trump, and we didn't get together. When we had the advantage, we didn't press the advantage. We didn't do all the things that we should have done. And I don't want to lose that opportunity again. We have a real opportunity, possibly the last opportunity, to turn the country around before we descend into European-style tax and spend socialism, or something even worse, like what we see in the third world.
That's right.
We just need to right the ship, and it's just it's a bad situation now in Washington. Thank God they're so ineffective. Imagine if they were effective at trying to do the bad things that they want to do.
Exactly. Well, Mike, thank you for coming on. Thank you for fighting the good fight. You always do that. You're a fighter, and that's one of the things we love about you. We always love hearing from you. Appreciate the call this morning and some inside baseball on some important issues happening here locally. And, folks, listen to what Mike said. Go out there and look at Jerry Torres. He's the guy to put in place to run against Kathy Castor. He's got the best shot at beating her. Mike, thanks again for coming on today.
Thanks so much. It's always great to talk to you guys. Have a great day. Appreciate
you too.
It.
Thanks, Mike. I love him. He's great.
Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.